My name is Hector Armienta. I'm the Artistic Director of Opera Cultura and also a composer. And I want to welcome you to another video interview of Los Revolucionariós, a program devoted to the work of Latinx artists changing the face of opera on and off stage. And today I have a wonderful conductor, Mexican conductor, actually lives in New York and conducts all over, Felipe Tristan. Welcome, Felipe. How are you?
Hello, thank you. Thanks for having me here. I'm happy to be talking to you and to your audience.
Very good. And Felipe, did I pronounce your name correctly? Felipe Tristan?
That's exactly right, Felipe Tristan.
Okay, I want to make sure I have the accents in the correct place. So, Felipe, tell me, how were you first introduced to classical music, really, and opera?
Well, really, music has been part of my life since I can remember, though not from a musical household per se, but still in my house there was always music, whether classical, popular, rock. Both of my parents were musical, but not musicians. And so I grew up in that environment, began singing actually in children's choirs, and then at church, then in the school, the elementary school, the choir, all boys. Then that transition to playing instruments in the band at school. So really, it was rather organic, one thing after another. Later, many years later, entered the conservatory in Monterrey, in Mexico, and then pursued professional studies there, and then came to the US a few years ago, over 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and to Texas, to Houston, first to Houston, then to North Carolina, and finally here to New York, where I came in 2011 for a fellowship at Lincoln Center. And then after that, one thing led to another, and here I am. But to answer your question about opera, really, I can't really pinpoint a specific moment. I know that I like theater, I like music, I like drama, of course, and then what do you get when you combine all of those? Well, opera. So I guess it was meant to be for me to be really attracted to the genre.
Now, I'm going to jump ahead to one of the questions I wanted to ask you, which is, what do you think that for you as a conductor, how do you approach conducting opera differently than conducting an orchestra with no singers?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, a lot of the times I see that one group versus the other can inform the other a lot. And I think in one word, if I was to put it in one word, it would be abstraction. In opera, of course, we have the libretto, we have the text that informs a lot of what's happening. Some operas more than others, some composers more than others, of course. But on the other hand, and symphonic music, purely symphonic music, a lot of the musical ideas, narrative, it's a lot more abstract. And so we need to work towards depicting something, and I don't mean like programmatic music per se, sunrise or a storm, things of this nature, but rather a narrative, some kind of narrative, an overarching syntax and a narrative, a message.
Are there any composers, opera composers, that you prefer to conduct?
Yeah, well, I don't have a particular preference, but of course, bigger orchestrations, bigger, denser stories, verismo, and even later, I tend to gravitate towards that. bel canto, of course. I love classical, but generally speaking, I tend to gravitate more towards that dramatic elements, and even the stories have a lot more depth, and more the characters have more development, if you will, versus simpler, more pure early opera.
Okay, so I mean, it's a very interesting statement for me because, as you know, I'm an opera composer, and uh, and I always think that yes, there's a narrative that's happening on stage, but the orchestra is that fourth character. So the composer does provide information in not only just the orchestra in general, but in terms of the orchestration and the choices. So I think that it's more complex actually, and because I'm obviously biased,
Right.
than conducting symphonic music.
Yeah, well, I mean, I totally see your point. I believe then the using of the word simpler comes from trying to determine, delineate what the message is. Where in a symphonic work, there could be a message that's broad, that's not specifically decided, if you will. Like, an idea is more of an idea, so more abstract. Whereas in opera, it's quite specific. It's quite, and even more specific if you're working in a production that's decidedly modern, in the 1950s, or reinventing certain aspects of the staging. So that makes it very specific, and in a way simpler to go towards something. Whereas in the other one, you have clues. In the symphonic, you have clues, you have ideas, you could have historical context and performance practice and all that, but it's a more complex journey to discover and to arrive to an interpretation. I think actually you never arrive. It's an interpretation
Right.
that's evolving.
I think I mean, it's a very interesting conversation, very thoughtful conversation. I think also different opera conductors would conduct different work differently. Certain lines would rise, and certain tempi would change. And then when I think about symphonic music, and I'm not a conductor, so you're the expert here. But I would think also the interpretation is based upon, again, who the conductor is and then who your teacher is. So I remember reading something about Bernstein when he studied with, and please correct me, with Koussevitzky, and then he studied with, I can't remember his professor before that, but they both had very, very different approaches. So then, of course, how Bernstein conducted, um, is informed not only by the music, but also by who his professors were, whose mentors were.
Right. Well, there comes the debate of whether we are clones, or students of our teachers, and that they have an imprint to us, or they are the kind of teacher that foster our very own unique qualities, and then we just go with them. There's cases of students that, and not just in conducting or vocal in general, instrumentalists, that no two students are alike and the teacher is the same. So and the opposite, there's students, musicians, that all sound the same, all have the same teaching, same methodology. It's up to them to stand out from that
Yeah.
pain.
Do you find that your approach is any different when you conduct in Mexico to a Mexican audience than it is when you conduct to a U.S. audience? And that's pretty broad, but I'm just wondering if there's certain sensibilities that are different.
Yeah, That's another great question. I think essentially there are no differences, of course. As a creator, as a stage performer, if you will, because as a composer you could be a creator, but you're not on the stage. As a stage performer, you don't necessarily think of who you're delivering the message to. You just want to make sure that you're delivering an exceptional, at the highest possible level, quality. Of course, that's the goal. But of course, you don't give the same interpretation uh, if if it's the 20th time, or if you are in at a competition, or opening night, or closing night, things like this, different factors. But as far as Mexico and US differences, not really. And at least in my case, I think I try to of course give my best, regardless. um, One thing that we could observe is that the repertoire tends to be in Mexico. I guess there's still a little more conservative, in that too modern. I wouldn't risk doing something like necessarily 21st century opera yet. It depends on the circumstance. But for the most part, I know that the traditional operas top 10 are always a hit, that people will come see them. They will still come see if we do something more modern, of course. But the reception and how welcoming they would be, by far, if we're more traditional.
Mhm. So you don't think that, again, I'm just general question. You don't think that sort of a conductor who's from Germany, or a conductor who's from Italy, or a conductor who's from Mexico, they're not informed based on their cultural experiences and growing up?
Oh yes, of course. I mean,
Okay.
there's no way that one cannot imprint the cultural, idiosyncratic elements. We are who we are, and we're made of our own particular uh, histories, and influence of our cultural ethics, morals, etc. And so, yeah, of course, there's an influence.
Mhm.
But
So
to
it
go
does influence a little bit in terms of your approach when you're conducting the repertoire.
Well, it's specifically, as you asked for the difference between in the US and in Mexico. It does influence, in that I know more or less what the reception will be for specific repertoire. But how I do it,
Mm.
uh, not really. How I try to, as I said, do my best, regardless of where I am geographically. Um, and even regardless of where I am, if it's, say, a competition, or a very informal uh, uh, presentation at a church in a rural area, regardless of that, I try to stay, focused. That's my personal goal. Um, but as far as artistic quality, I think it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter.
Yeah. So what before I let you go, Felipe, what's coming up for you? What would you like to share with everyone?
Yeah, well, I am traveling to Mexico in just a few days. I'll be there for 3 weeks for a number of concerts. And then I come back early December. Um, well, in Mexico, I'll be working with the Filarmónica de Querétaro. So it's a fantastic orchestra. I worked with them a number of years ago. We had a great um, chemistry, and did an opera gala, actually, then a Spanish program.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. It's a beautiful city. A
Yeah,
beautiful city. I love Querétaro.
it's really nice, and it's growing a lot. And so I'll be also in my hometown in Monterrey, and I'm actually not going to spend Thanksgiving in the US for the first time
Oh,
in years, but I'll be working, so I'll be performing. I come back in December, I have a concert, I think the 10th of December at the Manhattan School of Music, where I teach. And so that's what I have in the next month coming up.
You are a busy man, and I'm very happy for you. It's good to know. Good to know.
Thank you, and I hope we can work together in the future again and
Yes.
meet in person.
Yeah, I'd very much like that. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and a special thanks to Felipe Tristan, wonderful conductor who you can see is quite busy. So I look forward to seeing you at the next interview. All right, bye-bye.